Welcome to the news headlines this hour. South Korean jailed for breaking quarantine and Indonesian deploys troops. A South Korean man was jailed for 4 months on Tuesday for breaking coronavirus quarantine rules, authorities said in a country's first such prison sentence. The man, 27, left home while under 14-day self-isolation and was then moved to a quarantine facility where he also left without permission. South Korea endured one of the worst early outbreaks of the virus, but appears to have largely brought the spread under control thanks to an extensive trace, test and treat program. Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte says students will only go back to school if a coronavirus vaccine is available. Schools were shut in March and children were due to return to classes at the end of August. Unless I'm sure they are really safe, it is useless to be talking about opening of classes, the president said on Monday.
He says if no one graduates, then so be it. Researchers have been working on a vaccine, but it remains will become available.
And Indonesia virus crackdown sees troops on ground. Indonesia said on Tuesday it is deploying 340,000 troops to clamp down on rampant social distancing violations as coronavirus infections surge in the world's fourth most populous country. Thousands of children in the Philippines have suffered lasting physical, emotional and economic harm from the brutal drug war instigated by Rodrigo Duterte, the Philippine president. The disturbing report, which documents the trauma of children whose parents or guardians have been violently killed, comes a week before an expected decision the UN Human Rights Council to set up an independent international investigation into the Philippines' controversial counter-drugs operation. The spiraling death toll among alleged drug dealers and users since Mr. Duterte rose to power in 2016, vowing to feed the fish in Manila Bay, has caused international alarm. The Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency has reported that 5,601 drug suspects died during police anti-drug operations from July 1, 2016 to January 31, 2020. Brazilian federal police on Tuesday raided the residence of Rio de Janeiro's right-wing governor Wilson Witzel as a part of COVID-19 corruption probe, targeting one of President Jair Bolsonaro's political foes as the pandemic sweeps the nation. Federal prosecutors alleged Witzel, a formerly turned foe of Bolsonaro, and his wife Helena led a sprawling criminal operation in which her law firm was used to receive payment from a company that won state coronavirus contracts, according to federal court documents seen by Reuters. The spurious services undertaken by the company involved tent assembly and disassembly service, installation of water tanks, energy generators, and flooring for field hospitals, prosecutors said in a court document. In a statement, Witzel said he was innocent and accused Bolsonaro of interference in the probe. He said he was surprised and outraged to see social media posts that suggested the president's allies in Congress had prior knowledge of the operation, suggesting leaks and the construction of a false narrative against him.
Fascismo que está se instalando no nosso país, contra essa nova ditadura de perseguição.
New York Governor Andrew Cuomo on Tuesday said he believes the economy will not quickly return to how it was before the coronavirus pandemic. I don't believe the economy will just bounce back, he added. We have lost thousands of small businesses that are not going to reopen their doors, Cuomo said at his daily press briefing held at the New York Stock Exchanges in Manhattan. On Wednesday, Long Island will be allowed to begin phase 1 of the state's reopening process. The region's reopening marks the 9 out of the 10 regions to reopen since the statewide pause began in March. New York City is the only region which is yet to meet all the metrics, such as hospital beds and testing capacity, set for each individual region to reopen. In anticipation of those losses, Kumo urged the state and federal government to accelerate infrastructure projects that can provide jobs and take advantage of the low volume of traffic.
Less than truly tragic news, but when you've gone through what we have gone through, it's a sign that we're headed in the right direction. And we are. When you look at the curve in the state of New York, we are down. We're on the other side of the mountain, as we say, and the decline is continuing. That's different than what we're seeing in some other parts of the nation, where you see the curve either going up or just starting to flatten. So we're pleased with the progress that we're making in New York, and we're ready to go to the next phase, open a new chapter. Memorial Day is often a time when society transitions. Memorial Day, normally we're getting ready for the summer and people are starting to think about summer vacations and summer activity. We have that on a moderated basis in New York, but it's also a time of transition for us. And we're transitioning to a new chapter on reopening, restarting the economy. This is all a situation that has never happened before, so this is a first case for all of us. And we're trying to learn as we go along, and we don't want to just reopen the economy. We want to have a really smart reopening. We want to watch those numbers as we go forward. And we want to reopen the economy to make it stronger than it ever was before. How do you learn from this? And that.
As Brazil's daily COVID-19 death rate climbs to the highest in the world, a University of Washington study is warning its total death toll could climb fivefold to 125,000 by early August. Adding the fears, it has become a new hotspot in the pandemic. The forecast from the University of Washington's Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, released as Brazil's daily death toll climbed past that of the United States on Monday, came with a call for lockdowns that Brazil's president has resisted. Brazil must follow the lead of Wuhan, China, as well as Italy, Spain and New York by enforcing mandates and measures to gain control of a fast-moving epidemic and reduce transmission of the coronavirus, wrote IHME Director Dr. Christopher Murray. Without such measures, the Institute's model should show Brazil's daily death toll could keep climbing to until mid-July, driving shortages of critical hospital resources in Brazil, he said in a statement accompanying the findings. On Monday, Brazil's coronavirus death reported in the last 24 hours were higher than the fatalities in the US for the first time, according to the health ministry. Brazil registered 807 deaths and 620 died in the United States. The US government on Monday brought forward to Tuesday midnight's enforcement of restrictions of travel to the United Nations from Brazil, as South American country reported the highest death toll in the world for that day.
After 27 hours, a body was removed from this house. It is absurd what the state is doing with people who do not even have a chance to bury their dead.
It's all happening as Brazil is caught in a political crisis that has polarized the country between those who believe the way out is by imposing a lockdown and those, like President Jair Bolsonaro, who want to open up the economy. The fight has forced governors to clash with Bolsonaro.
50 trafficked Nigerian women have been rescued from Lebanon and returned home. Nigeria's foreign minister says they have all been placed in quarantine following their arrival on Sunday as a precaution against coronavirus. The country's anti-trafficking agency will interview them about their experiences after their isolation ends. Last month, a Nigerian woman working as a maid in Lebanon was rescued after being put up for sale on Facebook for $1,000. The UN says thousands of women and girls from Nigeria and other African countries are trafficked every year. They are often lured away with the promise of jobs in Europe or Asia, but usually end up being exploited as domestic maids or forced into prostitution. Last year, an undercover news agency found that Arabic investigation in Kuwait found that the domestic workers were being illegally brought and sold online in the booming world market.
To live last 2 years, thousands of Nigerian ladies have been trafficked to Lebanon with promises of a better job, promises of better life. But most often when they get there, conditions are quite different. We've seen a number of videos of Nigerian ladies trafficked to Lebanon calling on the Nigerian government to come to their rescue because they have been held as slaves. Just last month, a Lebanese put up a Nigerian lady for sale on Facebook. The selling price was $1,000. Nigerians have been embarking on this kind of journey because condition back home is not just ideal. There's poverty, there are no jobs, so it's easy to trust anybody that tells them that condition outside the country will be better. In the past, the drift had been towards Europe, but then traveling to Europe has its own problems. They have to travel through the Sahara Desert to Libya, and this journey is very, very dangerous. And from Libya, if they survive this journey, from Libya, they have to undertake another very dangerous journey from Libya across the Mediterranean Sea, which is also very dangerous. This, of course, does not promise them entry into Europe. But now the Middle East is creating an attraction because traffickers will procure tickets for them, they will procure visas for them, and so these Nigerians will travel to the Middle East, including Lebanon, in comfort. But when they get to Lebanon, the conditions are quite serious. They are not the ideal condition. Nigerians have been calling on the government to improve conditions back home so that Nigerians will not embark on this kind of journey that will take them into slavery. But it doesn't look as if things will get any better soon because the economy is still bad and we are not seeing any light at the end of the tunnel anytime soon.
Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte says he won't allow students to go back to school until a coronavirus vaccine is available. There haven't been any classes for more than 25 million primary and secondary students since March. They have been due to return to school at the end of August. But Mr. Duterte says the risk is too great. He says if no one graduates, then so be it. Researchers have been working on a vaccine, but it remains unclear when one will become available. The Philippines is reporting its largest single-day increase in infections in 7 weeks, with 350 new confirmed cases and 13 deaths. Since March, they have been due to return to school at the end of August. But Mr. Duterte says the risk is too great. He says if no one graduates, then so be it. Researchers have been working on a vaccine, but it remains unclear when one will become available. The Philippines is reporting its largest single-day increase in infections in 7 weeks, with 350 new confirmed cases and 13 deaths.
Police in Hong Kong have arrested 240 people and fired pepper pellets amidst fresh anti-mainland protests. Protesters were rallying against a bill on China's national anthem and Beijing's planned introduction of a national security law. Police said the arrests were on a suspicion of unauthorized assembly. Protesters opposed the anthem bill, which would criminalize insulting it, and the security law, which they fear will strip Hong Kong of basic freedoms. Protesters took to the street, blocking traffic in both Central and Causeway Bay. Police said that they had arrested 180 people there. They later added that another 60 had been arrested in the Bangkok district for blocking traffic. Other arrests were made for suspicion of possessing offensive weapons, including petrol bombs. Marches and protests have been taking place in a number of other districts. The trial against Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu began in Jerusalem on Sunday, marking the first time in Israel's history that a sitting Prime Minister has ever faced a trial. Last year, Netanyahu was indicted on bribery, fraud and breach of trust charges as a part of 3 separate corruption cases. The trial against Netanyahu was delayed by 2 months because of Israel's coronavirus outbreak. He has repeatedly denied all accusations of wrongdoing and claims that he is a victim of a political witch hunt, orchestrated by the left and the media. The trial against Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu began in Jerusalem. The 70-year-old began his 5th term as a Prime Minister this month as a part of power-sharing agreement with his rival Benny Gantz after a series of back-to-back elections failed to result in a coalition government over the past year. Netanyahu has refused to step down from power despite growing calls for his resignation and dwindling support from Israel public over his legal woes. Last year, Netanyahu was indicted on bribery as a part of 3 separate corruption cases. Case number 1000 refers to accusation that Netanyahu received expensive gifts from wealthy business magnates in exchange for favors. Case 2000 refers to allegations that Netanyahu promoted a particular newspaper in exchange for more positive coverage. And case 4000 alleges that Netanyahu granted regulatory benefits to a major Israeli telecommunication company in exchange for favorable media coverage. The maximum sentence for bribery is 10 years in prison. Netanyahu is the first Israeli Prime Minister to be indicted while in office. Venezuelan authorities celebrated on Monday as the first of 5 Iranian tankers loaded with gasoline docked in the South American country, delivering badly needed fuel to the crisis-stricken nation that sits atop the world's largest oil reserves. The gasoline shipments are arriving in defiance of the stiff sanctions by the Trump administration against both nations, and they mark a new era in the burgeoning relationship between Venezuela and Iran, which is expanding its footprint in the Western Hemisphere. Washington says both Iran and Venezuela are ruled by repressive regimes. It recently offering a $15 million reward for President Nicolas Maduro's arrest on drug smuggling charges in a maximum pressure campaign against the socialist leader. Washington recognizes opposition politician Juan Guaido as Venezuela's legitimate leader in a coalition of nearly 16 nations, which considers Maduro's election a fraud because his most popular rivals were banned from running.
The Venezuelan government imposed a strict lockdown almost 2 months ago to deter the spread of COVID-19. Most gas stations in Caracas are closed, and in the ones that are open, people have to line up for hours.
I come here every month and it takes us one night. I came at 5 and I have to stay until the next day. I only get 20 liters.
The gasoline from Iran will only last for a while. It won't change anything. There are political reasons, socio-economic. We depend on the authorities to give us gas and let us move. It will last only for a few months.
Iran has become a strategic partner for Venezuela since Hugo Chavez came to power. In the past months, Venezuela relied on companies like Russia's Rosneft for gasoline, but the situation has changed in the past year.
Rosneft stopped being interested in Venezuela mostly because of the sanctions. It has to do with strategic decisions. They'll have to invest lots of money, and there are so many troubles in Venezuela that people are not attracted to. Iran is a desperate measure for a country that has been collapsing for years.
In Afghanistan, the Afghan government urged the Taliban to extend a 3-day ceasefire set to end on Tuesday night, while announcing it would free 900 members of the insurgent groups in the biggest such release yet. The release is a part of a prison swap under a deal struck by the Taliban and the United States in Doha in February, as a precursor to peace talks between the Islamist militants and an inclusive Afghan delegation aiming to end a 2-decade-old war. For better management of the prisoner issue, it is important to extend the ceasefire, Javed Faisal, a spokesman for Afghanistan's National Security Advisor, told a news conference. Such an extension was key to avoiding further bloodshed, and Afghan government was ready for it. The Taliban had announced a 3-day ceasefire for the Eid ul-Fitr holiday that ends the Muslim holy month of Ramadan, in a move welcomed by both the Afghan and the US governments. But the Taliban have yet to say if they are willing to extend the ceasefire after it expires at midnight. Last month, the group rejected a call by the Afghan government for a Ramadan ceasefire. Fighting between the Taliban and the Afghan forces has intensified before the ceasefire, and the government said it would resume an offensive against the militant group in the wake of its deadly attack nationwide this month. This is Jyoti reporting for Our Voice.